I'm sure you've all seen Matt's Bugatti,
I bought this repossessed Bugatti Veyron.
and I'm sure you're thinking the same as us, the wheels could be better.
I bought a broken Bugatti Veyron for £900,000 and today we're going to attempt to restore it back to its original condition.
The automotive world has seen many surprising partnerships over the years. Famous racing drivers have worked with luxury car companies. Billionaires have teamed up with engineers to create dream machines. Television presenters have helped manufacturers launch exciting new models. But every now and then, a collaboration appears that feels completely different from anything that came before it. It is a kind of story that makes both car fans and industry experts stop what they're doing and ask the same question: how did this happen? That is exactly what happened when news began to spread that Jeremy Clarkson had personally reached out to Matt Armstrong with an idea that could become one of the most exciting independent automotive projects ever seen. At first, many people assumed the phone call was about another expensive repair. After all, Matt Armstrong had become famous for rebuilding crashed supercars and proving that many repairs people believed could only be done by official dealerships were actually possible in an independent workshop. Others guessed Clarkson wanted advice about one of his own cars, or perhaps wanted Matt to appear in a television project. Those ideas sounded reasonable because Clarkson has spent decades around some of the world's greatest mechanics, designers, and manufacturers. If he needed help with almost any vehicle, he had countless professional contacts available. Yet none of those guesses turned out to be correct. The truth was much bigger, and once people started putting the pieces together, they realized this was not simply another story about repairing an expensive hypercar. Instead, it was a story about how the automotive industry itself may be changing in ways that few people expected only a few years ago. To understand why this matters so much, you first need to understand who these two men are and why their worlds rarely overlap. Jeremy Clarkson has spent more than 3 decades becoming one of the most recognizable faces in automotive media. Through television, newspaper columns, and online projects, he has driven almost every important performance car ever built. He has tested Ferraris, Lamborghinis, McLarens, Bugattis, Koenigsegg's, Aston Martins, and countless other legendary machines. Manufacturers have invited him inside secret development centers, trusted him with prototype vehicles, and valued his opinions because they knew his reviews could influence millions of viewers. Matt Armstrong, on the other hand, followed a completely different path. He did not build his reputation inside a major manufacturer or earn fame through television. Instead, he picked up cameras, opened the doors of his workshop, and began showing ordinary people exactly what happened when damaged supercars were rebuilt piece by piece. Instead of hiding mistakes, he shared them. Instead of pretending every repair was easy, he explained the difficult moments, unexpected costs, and clever solutions that allowed impossible-looking projects to succeed. Viewers watched him transform wrecked vehicles into beautiful machines again, and with every successful rebuild, his audience grew larger. More importantly, his credibility grew because people could see every step of the process with their own eyes. That honesty became one of the biggest reasons millions of viewers trusted him. So when someone with Jeremy Clarkson's experience chose to call someone like Matt Armstrong instead of one of the world's biggest automotive companies, people immediately realized that something unusual was happening. It suggested that this was not about finding the biggest workshop or the oldest manufacturer. It was about finding someone who had earned trust in a completely different way. That single phone call quickly became more than just a conversation between two well-known names. It became the beginning of a discussion about creativity, independence, and the future of building cars outside the traditional factory system. Before anyone even knew the full reason behind the call, one thing had already become clear. This was not going to be an ordinary automotive story. To understand why Jeremy Clarkson's phone call felt so unusual, imagine the level of access he has built over the last 30 years. Clarkson is not just a television presenter who likes cars. He is one of the few people on Earth who has spent decades inside the highest levels of the automotive industry. He has visited Ferrari factories, toured Lamborghini headquarters, tested Bugatti hypercars, and driven prototype vehicles long before the public ever saw them. Engineers, designers, racing teams, and company executives know his name. If he wanted a custom project built, there are hundreds of respected workshops across the United Kingdom and Europe that would happily clear their schedules to work with him. He could call famous restoration specialists, race engineers, or luxury car builders and have a team assembled within days. That is why many people found it difficult to believe that Clarkson would personally reach out to an independent YouTube mechanic instead. The choice itself was the first clue that this was not a normal project. Matt Armstrong's workshop is not a giant corporate facility with marble floors and a showroom full of million-pound cars. It is a place where cameras capture real work, real problems, and real solutions. Viewers have watched him take apart damaged supercars, hunt for affordable replacement parts, and solve challenges that many people assumed only factory-trained specialists could handle. His reputation was not built through advertising or official certificates. It was built through public proof. Every successful rebuild became evidence that complicated automotive work could be understood, documented, and completed outside the traditional dealership network. That difference matters because it represents two completely different ideas of credibility. For decades, the car industry taught owners that the safest option was to stay inside the factory ecosystem. Expensive cars were supposed to be maintained by approved technicians using approved tools in approved workshops. Matt Armstrong challenged that idea without making speeches or attacking manufacturers. He simply turned on a camera and showed the work being done step by step. Millions of people watched him rebuild a crashed Bugatti Veyron, one of the most complicated cars ever created, and that project changed the way many enthusiasts thought about independent mechanics. Suddenly, the question was no longer is this allowed, but can this actually be done? And Matt kept proving that the answer was yes. This is what makes Clarkson's decision so interesting. A man who has access to the most exclusive automotive resources in the world chose someone whose greatest strength is transparency. Traditional workshops often work behind closed doors. Matt works in public. Traditional specialists protect their methods. Matt explains them. Traditional businesses sell expertise. Matt documents it. That public approach created a level of trust that is surprisingly powerful in the internet age. People do not just hear that he is skilled. They watch him solve problems in real time. They see mistakes, delays, unexpected costs, and creative fixes. Over time, that visibility became a kind of modern credential. So when Clarkson picked up the phone, many observers began asking a new question. What kind of project would require exactly that combination of technical ability, creativity, and public documentation? It did not seem likely that he wanted routine service or a simple restoration. Those jobs could be handled almost anywhere. The project had to be something more ambitious, something that benefited from a builder who was comfortable experimenting, comfortable being watched, and comfortable attempting ideas that larger organizations might consider too unusual or too risky. The more people thought about it, the clearer it became that this phone call was pointing toward a different kind of automotive future, one where independent creators might not only repair extraordinary cars, but also help create entirely new ones. Before revealing what Jeremy Clarkson actually wanted, it is worth thinking about all the things he could have asked Matt Armstrong to do and why none of those possibilities really fit. If Clarkson had simply needed his own car service, there would have been no reason to make a personal phone call. Owners of rare hypercars usually have direct access to factory-backed service centers that specialize in maintaining these machines. The cost is rarely an issue for someone like Clarkson, and the manufacturers themselves would happily make arrangements for one of their most famous supporters. If he wanted advice about restoring a classic vehicle, Britain is full of workshops with decades of experience restoring everything from vintage Jaguars to rare Ferraris. If he wanted someone to appear on television, that would normally be handled by producers, not by Clarkson personally. Even if he wanted to write about Matt Armstrong in one of his newspaper columns, or feature him in an interview, there were much easier ways to make that happen. One by one, every obvious explanation started to fall apart. That left only one conclusion. Whatever Clarkson had in mind had to be something so unusual that only Matt Armstrong seemed like the right person for the job. This is where Matt's journey becomes especially important. His greatest achievement was never just rebuilding expensive cars. Plenty of talented mechanics can repair damaged vehicles if they have enough time, money, and factory support. What made Matt different was his willingness to challenge ideas that many people accepted without question. When most people looked at a heavily damaged Bugatti Veyron, they saw an impossible repair and an enormous bill. Matt looked at the same car and saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. Instead of accepting that certain jobs belonged only to official dealerships, He began researching parts, comparing components, finding alternative suppliers, and carefully documenting every discovery. Viewers watched him remove body panels, inspect complicated systems, solve electrical problems, and slowly bring a car back to life that many experts believed would never return to the road. Every episode became another lesson, showing that knowledge was not something locked inside factory walls. It could be learned, tested, and shared with anyone willing to pay attention. That public learning process attracted millions of viewers because they were not just watching entertainment. They were watching someone challenge long-held beliefs using patience, skill, and evidence instead of arguments. By the time Clarkson made his phone call, Matt had become much more than a YouTube mechanic. He had become a symbol of independent thinking in the automotive world. That reputation may have been exactly what Clarkson was searching for. Imagine wanting to build something that had never existed before. Would you choose someone who always followed the same rulebook, or someone who had already proven that he could solve problems no rulebook had prepared him for? Creativity often comes from people willing to question old methods, and Matt had spent years doing exactly that. His workshop was a place where ideas were tested instead of dismissed. Every challenge was approached with curiosity rather than fear. Every setback became another opportunity to learn. That attitude is incredibly valuable when starting a completely new project, because building something from scratch is very different from repairing an existing car. There is no instruction manual. There is no official service guide. Every decision must be made through experimentation, engineering, and imagination. Clarkson understood this better than most people because he had spent years creating unusual automotive projects on television. He knew that the most exciting builds often came from people who were willing to think differently. Slowly, the picture became clearer. This phone call was not about fixing yesterday's engineering. It was about creating tomorrow's. Instead of asking Matt Armstrong to restore another famous machine, Jeremy Clarkson was inviting him to help build something entirely original. That single idea changed everything. Suddenly, this was no longer a story about one mechanic becoming more successful. It became a story about whether independent creators could move beyond repairing the world's greatest cars and begin designing new automotive legends of their own. The moment people learned what Jeremy Clarkson had actually asked Matt Armstrong to do, the entire conversation changed. This was not about servicing another expensive supercar or restoring a damaged classic. Clarkson wanted to build a car from the ground up alongside Matt Armstrong. At first, that idea sounded almost unbelievable because it represented something completely different from anything Matt had done publicly before. Until now, his reputation had been built on bringing broken machines back to life. He took cars that others considered beyond repair and proved they could return to the road with enough patience, skill, and determination. But creating a completely new vehicle is a much bigger challenge. When you repair a car, you already have a design to follow. Every bolt, every panel, and every component has a place determined by the manufacturer. Building a car from scratch is another world entirely. Every decision must be made before the first piece of metal is even cut. You have to think about the chassis, the suspension, the engine, the weight distribution, the aerodynamics, the electronics, the safety systems, and hundreds of other details that most drivers never even notice. One small mistake during the planning stage can create problems that affect the entire project later. That is why building a car has traditionally been the job of major manufacturers with thousands of engineers and enormous research budgets. Companies like Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, and Bugatti spend years developing a single new model. They test prototypes in wind tunnels, race tracks, deserts, and freezing mountains before allowing customers to buy them. Against that background, the idea of a self-taught mechanic and one of the world's most famous television presenters creating their own car sounded almost impossible. Yet impossible projects have become one of Matt Armstrong's trademarks. Time after time, he has shown that difficult challenges can be solved by breaking them into smaller steps and refusing to give up when problems appear. That attitude is one of the biggest reasons his audience continues to grow. People are not simply interested in the finished result. They enjoy watching the journey. They like seeing unexpected setbacks, creative solutions, and moments when careful thinking succeeds where expensive equipment alone cannot. Jeremy Clarkson understands the value of that kind of storytelling better than almost anyone. During his years on television, He learned that viewers become emotionally invested when they watch ambitious people chase difficult goals. A perfect project completed without struggle is rarely memorable. A complicated project filled with obstacles, clever ideas, failures, and eventual success creates unforgettable television. If Clarkson and Matt really move forward with this build, millions of people will likely follow every stage of the process. They will watch the first sketches become real components. They will see design ideas tested and sometimes rejected. They will experience the excitement of hearing an engine start for the first time and the nervous anticipation before the car completes its first drive. Every milestone will become part of a much larger story. More importantly, this project can inspire thousands of young mechanics, engineers, and car enthusiasts around the world. Many people dream of designing their own vehicle, but assume they need a huge company behind them before they can even begin. Seeing an independent workshop take on such an ambitious challenge may encourage a new generation to believe that great ideas do not always have to come from billion-dollar corporations. Sometimes they begin inside an ordinary garage with ordinary tools and extraordinary determination. That possibility is what makes this collaboration feel so important. It is not simply about building one custom car. It is about proving that creativity, knowledge, and persistence can sometimes compete with resources, history, and tradition. If the project succeeds, it may become one of the clearest examples yet that the future of automotive innovation is no longer limited to the world's biggest manufacturers. It can also belong to passionate independent builders who are willing to share every step of their journey with the world. As exciting as this possible collaboration sounds, its importance goes far beyond one custom-built car. The real story is about how the automotive industry has been quietly changing over the past decade. For many years, car manufacturers controlled almost every part of the ownership experience. If you bought an expensive sports car or hypercar, you were expected to return to a factory or an approved dealership whenever something needed attention. The companies decided who could repair the cars, who had access to technical information, and who could order certain parts. Owners often believed that leaving this official system would put their valuable cars at risk. That belief gave manufacturers enormous influence over the entire market. It was not only about selling cars anymore. It was also about controlling everything that happened after the sale. Independent mechanics often found themselves locked out of important software, diagnostic systems, and technical documents. Even highly skilled professionals sometimes struggled to repair modern performance cars because the information they needed was kept behind corporate walls. This created the idea that official certification was the only true measure of expertise. But the rise of YouTube, social media, and online communities slowly began changing that picture. Instead of relying only on advertisements or company claims, people could now watch skilled mechanics perform complicated repairs with their own eyes. They could compare different methods, learn about common problems, and understand how modern cars actually worked. Matt Armstrong became one of the best examples of this new generation of creators. His videos did not simply entertain people, they educated them. Every rebuild showed that knowledge could be shared openly instead of being treated like a secret. Viewers saw expensive components removed, inspected, repaired, and reinstalled step by step. They learned that many repairs were challenging but not impossible. As more people watched these projects, confidence in independent workshops began to grow. This shift is one of the biggest reasons Clarkson's decision carries so much meaning. By choosing Matt Armstrong for such an ambitious project, he is recognizing a new kind of credibility. In the past, credibility usually came from certificates hanging on workshop walls, factory training programs, or decades of corporate experience. Today, credibility can also come from transparency. Millions of people have watched Matt solve real problems without hiding the difficult parts. They have seen failed attempts, unexpected setbacks, budget challenges, and creative solutions. That openness creates trust because viewers know they are seeing the complete story instead of a carefully polished advertisement. Jeremy Clarkson understands the value of trust better than almost anyone in the automotive world. His career has been built on giving honest opinions, even when manufacturers disagreed with him. That is one reason so many people continue to respect his views after all these years. When someone with that reputation chooses to work with an independent creator instead of a famous manufacturer, the decision sends a powerful message throughout the industry. It suggests that skill, determination, and public proof are becoming just as important as official approval. This does not mean traditional manufacturers are suddenly becoming irrelevant. Companies like Ferrari, Bugatti, Lamborghini, McLaren, and Aston Martin will always play an essential role in developing the world's most advanced performance cars. Their engineering resources remain unmatched in many areas. However, the relationship between manufacturers and independent experts is beginning to change. Instead of existing in completely separate worlds, they may increasingly influence one another. Independent builders bring fresh ideas, creative problem solving, and a willingness to experiment without the limits of large corporate structures. Manufacturers bring decades of engineering experience, advanced technology, and global production capabilities. If these two worlds learn to cooperate rather than compete, the automotive industry could become more innovative than ever before. Clarkson's phone call may therefore represent much more than the start of one exciting build. It could become a symbol of a future where passion, openness, and practical skill matter just as much as corporate history, proving that the next great automotive idea might come from an independent workshop just as easily as from a famous factory.